Hello, you are listening to Deeply Curious. My name is Cody Jensen, and joining me in our New York City studio apartment is Sarah Jensen, my wife.
Hello.
In this episode, we are continuing on the conversation of 30 things that I've learned in my 30s.
Yes.
The last episode, we did 1 through 15. If you missed that, I'd recommend maybe heading over to last week's episode and listening to that one first, because this episode is going to be number 15 through 30.
16.
Number 16 through 30.
Yep.
Of all the things, just some life lessons.
Yeah.
It isn't everything I've learned. It's just the things that came to mind when I was writing down 30 things that I've learned. But before we jump into the conversation, just want to give credit where credit is due, and that this podcast is produced by the members over at Jensen AV Club. That is our Patreon page. And this week's episode is associate produced by Greg Stratton, Greg and Christy Jensen, and Karen Carmen, and it is produced by Christian B. Schmidt. If you don't know what the Jensen AV Club is, that is our Patreon page. It's where you can go and you can support us and you can support this show while also gaining access to exclusive content and deeper access to us as humans, as artists,
As human beings.
And so we do things over there like give director's commentary on the videos, or a monthly newsletter from Sarah diving in deeper into the things that we created that month, a monthly live stream, one-on-one coaching with either one of us, and many other things.
Yeah.
If you want to check out the perks that you can gain by supporting this show on a financial level, you can do that by going to jensenav.club. Thank you so much to all of our Jensen AV Club members.
Shout out.
Whoop, whoop. And thank you for making this show possible. Again, that is jensenav.club if you want to check it out. So, moving into this week's show.
Yep.
We're continuing on, like I said, 30 things I've learned. So if you missed last week's show, it came out the day after my 30th birthday.
Yeah.
So
you've been 30 for a week.
Yes, I am now 30 in a week. I'm in my 31st year of life.
Yes, you are.
And so there has been a lot of things I've learned. One of the lessons that I have learned is that I still have a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There will be, from now to 40, I will learn more than 40 new things in my life. But jumping back into this list here, number 15 was negativity is toxic and infectious.
Mm-hmm.
Number 16, self-awareness is everything.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that we have said on this podcast a lot, but that is a lesson that I learned, I would say probably in my mid-20s, that ultimately self-awareness is everything, and that the only way to growth is through actually being self-aware and being it's knowing the whys behind your whats. It's knowing the whys behind the how you act, and all that type of stuff. And ultimately I think that is probably the core of self-awareness, is knowing why. And I think that knowing why is the ultimate power you can have in your life. Is being self-aware in the things that you do, being self-aware, so self-aware that you are aware of your flaws.
Right.
And
I would say arguably that's the most important part of
Yes.
self-awareness, because without being aware of your flaws, you can't grow.
Right.
So.
But it is also important to be aware of your strengths as well. And
Totally.
you can be just as blind to your actual strengths as you are to your actual
I'm
flaws.
probably more blind to my strengths than my flaws.
Yeah. I would say that in that, I would say naturally you and I are completely opposite in that I am naturally more aware of my strengths, and I'm confident in my strengths, and I'm willing to step out and operate in those strengths.
Yeah.
You are naturally more aware of your flaws, and naturally more are What would you say? Because it's not operate. It's like held back by your flaws.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm just
way.
so much more focused on what's wrong with me and how to fix it versus, okay, well, this is what I do well. So let me try doing that. You know what I mean?
It's like being so aware that, I guess maybe it has more to do with, not being fully aware, or I guess maybe just not fully confident in your strengths.
I would say both. Like if you ask me right now to name my strengths, nothing is coming to mind.
Yeah.
So,
but then on the flip side, for me, it takes much more time for me to recognize the flaws,
right?
And for me to truly recognize and be self-aware of the growth areas and the things that I need to change and grow in and all that type of stuff, which is interesting. I like to think about just between the two of us. That we're like kind of opposite in that way. But I think most married couples probably are good at showing each other your flaws. But I think that we do have a good yin and yang thing going on here, where you are able to find and articulate and help me in those areas of growth opportunities.
I love that is the new thing we say now. Here's your growth opportunity.
Yes. In the same way that I,
right.
recognize and encourage and, try to help you operate in a lot of the strengths that you aren't confident in.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever really succeeded, but I try to.
It's probably more on me though than you, honestly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I try to be, encouraging, but so there's that.
Yeah. Self-awareness is everything.
Yeah, and we've said that 100 times on the. We probably
keep saying it. 100
yeah, this
times.
is like episode 44 or something. I don't remember the exact number. But if it is episode 44, then we probably said it 44 times.
Yeah.
17. Sex and intimacy are not the same, and without intimacy, I am empty. That is something that I've learned through my 20s. Especially in my early 20s, I equated that sex in the act of like sexual intercourse, that was intimacy. Like that, that those two intimacy,
they meant the same thing.
Intimacy would be defined as sexual intercourse. But as I matured and grew and discovered, and just in all ways, I just have learned that there is a major difference between sex and intimacy. And you can easily have sex without intimacy. And you can also have intimacy without actually having sex. Yeah. And I have, through learning the difference between sex and intimacy, I have also learned that for me and my, I guess, love languages and things like that, and the way that I am energized through relationship is that I need intimacy between us, like between, I guess you're my wife, so talking to you. But, generally speaking, though, it's like in my relationships and in my relationship with you, it's like I desire and much more require and need intimacy in, whatever ways that means. And intimacy comes with can coincide with sex, but doesn't require sex for intimacy.
Well, they're not the same definition.
Yeah.
I
mean, because you can easily like just have sex and there's no intimacy involved.
Right. And I feel like that's pretty understandable.
Yeah. But then there's the deeper thing of intimacy, and you can literally be intimate with one another without even touching. That one, I have a strong love language in physical touch. So intimacy is a little bit tied to more of physical touch in that, but it is intimate, like conversation is in the same vein. Yeah. But, just holding each other, just, kissing, just like holding hands, all of that can feel and is, can hold way more intimacy in that than just the physical act of sex. And so that is something that I have learned and grew in and realized that, whatever, like sex is not the like thing I'm looking for in to fulfill me. It's intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Number 18, you can honor and question authority at the same time.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like it's interesting because if you think about that in the like church world, like honoring authority makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not questioning authority, really. But then in the regular
Secular
world, what
yeah.
do you want to call it? The world.
Yeah.
I feel like the idea of honoring authority is like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I feel like it really depends on what perspective you're looking at.
Yeah.
Depends on how that is like defined. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Because like honoring authority is not a thing that you learn or are taught in any sort of capacity in like work or school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something really, really fulfilling, I don't know, about honoring your authority. Well, because it's really just like honoring people.
Right.
But not accepting everything that they do as ultimate truth or whatever. Like you were saying, you're allowed to question people who are above you, but that doesn't mean you're allowed to disrespect and dishonor them.
A prime example would be in a boss-employee relationship. That is something that person has authority over you,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean that they're perfect, and that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be questioned. They're not a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't an authoritative regime.
Yeah.
It's just a job, but they also should be honored and held. You should give them the honor of the position that they have, and that if you are questioning them, if you have a problem with them, this isn't something that you should be bickering amongst your peers,
Right.
and especially your subordinates or whatever in the hierarchy of most corporate jobs. That is just gossip, negativity, bad work culture, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And if you have if you are questioning that authority, if you are questioning the person, I guess, in authority, it is your responsibility to honor them in that and go to them directly, go to them personally and say, whatever it is that you need to say.
Yeah. Unless it's obviously something very personal, you can go to HR. I mean, that's why HR exists. If it's some sort of harassment or whatever.
The life lesson that I wrote down is not about like that your boss is like, sexually harassing or, verbally abusing, like none of that type of stuff. It's more so to just that you think that what they are doing, the decision they made is wrong, or you think you have a better idea for how this thing could be run, or the way that they are going about delivering certain messages is creating a bad work environment for you and your peers. That type of stuff is, you have the right to question that person that is in authority, but you should choose to do that in honor.
Yes.
And go to them directly, speak your the things that you feel need to be questioned, resolved, whatever it is, versus just bashing, gossiping,
or even just
going behind their
to
back.
them. Even just going to them, but doing it in a disrespectful way is still not honoring.
Yes.
You can say something to somebody's face and not be honorable.
Right.
So it's all about in your character and demeanor.
Yep. And in the same way that, like, if you were in a meeting of like a boardroom or whatever, there's a whole bunch of people around. Everybody's allowed to speak freely, and there's obviously somebody there who is in authority of the meeting itself, or is in authority of everybody in the meeting. That type of thing, you can still speak and question and bring up things and even completely disagree with the decision, and you can do that in honor, and you can do that in love. In a corporate environment, saying in love may confuse, but what I mean by that is that we are all humans.
Yeah.
And we should all love one another as fellow humans.
Yeah.
Number 19, your character is only as strong as your last day.
Yeah. That's so true. Like if you, I don't know, leave a job or whatever, I feel like the general disposition of people is to check out. Once you know you're done, you're done. And regardless of how much longer you're at that job or in that city or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Our general disposition is just to check out. But yeah, that doesn't exactly prove your character. And it's much more rewarding to prove your character, even if you're only proving it to yourself, even if nobody else notices or cares. You're proving to yourself that you have the mental strength to finish, to do it.
Yeah, finishing well is very important. And to what you were just saying, another way to look at this as, your character is only as strong as your last day is your character is only as strong as what you do when nobody is looking.
Yeah.
If nobody is looking, let's just take like a very trivial thing. If nobody is looking and there is a piece of trash on the ground and, you'd walk by it, but then you walk by another piece of trash and there's a group of people around and they see you pick it up, your character is only as strong as what you decided to do when nobody was looking.
Yeah, for the validation or whatever.
Everybody, for the most part, starts well. It's easy. It's easy
it's fun. It's fresh.
It's fun,
exciting.
fresh, yeah, all that type of stuff, to walk into a new situation, a new job, a new whatever it is, and to start well.
Yeah.
It is much more difficult to finish well. And your character, ultimately, is only as strong as what you choose to do in your last days.
Yeah.
And if you pack it in and you whatever it is, like, just know and realize that you are showing your true character on your last day.
Yeah.
And I think that we, in our society, we don't value the finish.
Yeah. Totally.
Even if it is just for ourselves.
Yeah, because we just think like, on to the next. But you're still where you are for a reason,
Yep.
You might as well do well.
Number 20, failure is a gift. Fail early, fail often.
You like that quote. Isn't that a quote?
I don't know. I mean, probably.
I feel like it is.
Me.
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
Failure is a gift. Fail early, fail often.
There's a quote I read, speaking of quotes, a quote I read recently, and I don't remember exactly what it was, of course, but it was something about like failure isn't an outcome, failure is not trying, or something like that. So like if you try something and you don't get the outcome that you wanted, it doesn't mean it was a failure, because the failure is in not trying it at all.
Right.
And I kind of have come to really believe that failure isn't a thing, because either you accomplish your goal of like the outcome that you wanted, you figure out you did it, or you learn something to apply to the next time when it's time to try again.
Right.
Which is not a failure. I mean, the light bulb, like inventing electricity, how many times did he fail?
Thousands of light bulbs.
Thousands and thousands. But every single time he learned a new thing about, I don't know, terms and science, electricity that he needed to know in order to get it correct.
Yeah.
So it wasn't failure. It was trial and error, which is all of life.
Right. And my thing is like, if you're afraid of failure, it keeps you from acting. And ultimately that is failing.
Totally.
That if you do nothing, that is more of a failure than trying and learning. Because if you try something and you learn from it, then yes, that idea failed, or, that method failed, but you did not fail. You learned.
Exactly.
You learned what method not to do now, or what thing not to try.
Or what you needed to tweak in order to whatever.
Or even like, talking about life. It's like, you learned what city you should live in.
Yeah.
What city you shouldn't live in.
Well,
or
not
what,
necessarily what I should live in, but
yeah. Or like, you learned that location or the that job, it's like, it's not a failure to you got this job and then you quit, or because you didn't like it. You didn't fail. You just learned something else about yourself, that you don't like that environment, or you don't like the act of that specific job. None of those things are failing. Those are all just trying things and learning more about yourself.
Yeah, I think along those same lines, I was talking to a friend, and she was like, the way to look at things is not like, oh, this wasn't what I wanted or wasn't what I thought it was. It's, oh, I tried it and now I know it's what I don't want.
Right.
It's like a completely different perspective shift of like being disappointed or being like, okay, cool, I figured out this isn't what I want, so I can move on to the next thing. It's like freeing yourself from that. It's a completely different perspective shift.
Yep. And along those lines too is that a lot of times we can let it's not the failure, it's the perception of others in that quote unquote failure.
Yeah.
That if, you went to that school, or you got that job, or you moved to that place, or you tried this business and you failed, then these people are going to know that, and they are going to think certain things about you. Number one, nobody ever thinks what you actually think they're going to think about you. No. Number two, who cares?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be letting the opinions of others dictate
especially
the lessons and the life of which that you want to live.
Especially the others who aren't going to see the best of you. You know what I mean? Because if they can't like see that you're willing to risk, which is a positive trait, I believe, then they don't matter. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if your friend is like against you taking a risk, I mean, obviously there's like all sorts of nuances.
Seek wise counsel.
Yeah, but like if they're going to shame you for taking a risk, then you don't need them. That's my opinion.
There's a life lesson from Sarah. Number 21 on my list is don't judge others for morals they don't believe in.
Totally agree. This is like my biggest thing about, not to get all churchy and political, but this is my biggest thing about church. Is that why should we hold somebody who does not believe the same way that I believe to the same standards? It makes literally no sense. They're not holding me to theirs.
Right.
So I'm not going to hold them to mine. Like, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, like let's take a prime example of something like this, that there are certain denominations, I guess, of the American Christian faith who strongly believe that alcohol is a sin, like a bad, like they look at it as a sin that should be avoided at all costs. A moment on the lips, is
a lifetime on the hips.
Yes. But that may be a little extreme, but the whole point of that is there are certain, denominations of faith in America that very much think that alcohol is a complete sin, no matter what quantity it is. And so they will try to hold those moral standards over everybody in a free nation, and try to impose, this isn't so much anymore, but try to impose laws even that keep people, it's kind of whole prohibition type thing, to try to keep people who don't believe in the moral standard of which you choose to live your life.
Yeah.
They see nothing morally wrong with drinking, and even drinking in excess.
Right.
It's like, why are you judging somebody else for the morals of which you have chosen to live by that ultimately they don't even believe in at all?
Right. Absolutely. I think that it's absurd that we would be like, I know you don't believe what I believe, but please live by my standards.
Right.
Okay. Like if somebody told me that, I would just laugh in their face. Like, no, I'm not going to live by your standards because I don't believe what you believe. So why would I force that on somebody else? It makes literally zero sense.
Yep.
It's a soapbox of mine, I guess.
Number 22. Groupthink is dangerous and creates teams not understanding.
Groupthink is dangerous. How is it dangerous?
It's dangerous in the fact that it creates teams and not understanding.
So like you're either on my team or against me?
If we all move towards and fall into this thing of group thinking.
Can we define group thinking?
I mean,
so that I have like a mental picture of like what we're talking about here.
A prime example would be conservatives and liberals. Like that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That where there's like no room for nuance.
Right.
Okay.
That the group think is that everybody, if you are in, you're in, and you think as the group. And there's no room for understanding or other movement outside of that. Yeah. And so, but we do that with everything. It's like it's the mob mentality. It's like you start small, like with this, a small group of people, but then that grows into a larger group of people, and ultimately the whole group thinks as one instead of thinking as a group of individuals.
Which I feel like
it's a group as a group.
That is probably my biggest pet peeve or something about being classified in a group. I've always said that, like specifically about Christianity and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but what the church as a whole or something is preaching on one particular subject, I maybe don't necessarily agree with. But now if I tell somebody that I'm a Christian, they're going to think that about me because it's like a common knowledge thing.
Right.
I've also said that about being a feminist. I am a feminist, but like I don't want to be wrapped into maybe the more extreme ideas about feminism and like I guess the extreme ideas about Christianity. I've always said that. I guess I disagree with groupthink. I didn't realize it was groupthink. I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's just in the fact that like even let's just go back to like conservatives and liberals in politics.
Yeah.
We are in a spot now where it is two groups.
Right.
You're either in or you're out. Yeah. There's no room for you to be a doubting liberal or a doubting Republican in that you think that the political like way that we run a certain piece of government should be this way, but also I disagree with the conservative movement in these things. Like there's no room for that anymore, which means that there's no room for understanding, there's no room for compromise, because if you are in, you are right. If you are out, you are wrong. And if you participate in something like, especially with politics, but in all things in life, if it becomes to the point where if you're in, you're right, and if you're out, you're wrong, then you are. That means that what you are saying is that, let's say that America is split 50-50, right, left, Republican, Democrat. That means that you are saying that 50% of this nation's population is completely wrong in everything they believe because they identify with a political party that you aren't identify with.
Yeah.
That leaves zero room for understanding perspective and zero room for understanding nuance and zero understanding for any sort of compromise in what 50% of the nation is looking for and wanting. And it is the exact same on both sides. Everybody think like if you're on one side, you think that you are 100% right and the other side are idiots and there's no how could they possibly think that way? Then the other side is thinking the exact same thing, and you have 50% of the nation thinking that the other half is complete idiots and the other half thinking that they're complete idiots and heartless. And it's not true. That none of that is true, but that happens because you actively engage in groupthink, and you think, and it becomes this thing where just because you agree with one thing doesn't mean that you can't disagree with others, and that you can't operate inside a certain philosophy or whatever. And it just destroys the individual. And
yeah, I do think there's something to be said about individualism and nuance. I'm all about nuance. Everything is nuanced. Nothing is black and white. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Groupthink. There you go. So how do you avoid groupthink? I mean, I guess just be aware of it.
You question. You find your why. You know exactly why you feel a certain way, not that you see it that way because the people you agree with see it that way, and they put it on. Again, this is it's easy to talk about politics because it's a huge problem.
And it's so prevalent right now.
And you have one news organization that you can watch and agree with absolutely everything they say because they're on your side, and then you can look at another one and completely disagree with everything they say because they're not on your side. And
the truth is somewhere in the middle,
right?
Probably.
But really, you need to not participate in that. You need to be seeking out sources that do not already confirm your biases towards the world, and truly question things.
Yeah,
and that goes into, let's just talk about like entertainment and things like that. It's like the groupthink can also be just that everybody is watching this one thing, and like everybody's liking and whatever this one piece of art, whether it's a YouTube video or a movie or a book and all that type of thing.
I remember this very specifically about House of Cards. The first couple of seasons, oh my gosh, I could not have a because I didn't start watching until 3.
Yeah, I don't know,
or something. Anyway, could not have a conversation with somebody without them saying, "Did you watch House of Cards?" Mm-hmm. Oh my god.
But what I'm getting at with this is not it's not about that. It's more so about that the groupthink side of it does not ultimately push up the best art to the top.
Yeah.
It pushes the least offensive to the top.
Right, because it's the one that the most people will agree with.
And I've told this story before, but in a groupthink scenario where everybody's trying to find, become one, ultimately the favorite color of every single group will always be blue because it's the least offensive color.
Right.
And so that, I think there's just lots of dangers in not truly questioning why you think and believe certain things, because then you fall into groupthink and you fall into thinking that half the population are idiots whenever
it's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
And then we get to number 23. America is not the greatest country.
Ruffle some feathers here.
America is a great country, but America is not the greatest country.
I mean, I 100% agree.
I'm not saying this is a life lesson for me. But if I'm explaining it, it is that I have no other country to say this country is definitely greater than America.
Right.
It's more so.
And it's also to recognize that we are privileged for being born here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, we're lucky.
But it's more so that being the greatest economic power doesn't equate to being the best country in the world.
Right.
It's the greatest at one thing, creating money, at stirring up and creating a strong economy,
holding
which ultimately
power.
Is good for the people. Strong economy is great. It helps us. It does all these sort of things. But ultimately, Americans are committing suicide at a higher and higher rate every year while the rest of the world drops. Does that equate to being America the greatest country in the world?
Yeah.
Not to me.
I also think this kind of plays into nationalism.
Right.
Which we've talked about. And it's just kind of absurd to think about how much pride as an American you are sort of obligated to put in your country. Which is insane. I mean, we were all born here out of sheer luck. There's no reason that we were born here and not
anywhere else.
We just were. So it seems kind of weird to me that America puts so much obligation on American pride. I mean, if you love America, cool, but it's just a country.
Right.
It's not on that sort of philosophical, emotional level, it's not that much better than anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a country.
There are certain things about America that America is greater than all other countries in these like specific things. But Americans act like if you don't live in America, then you are second class in that you don't live a meaningful life because, I mean,
there's
how
a lot
could
of
you?
entitlement in being
it's just
American.
being entitled. And, just through times of my life and then through travel and then through figuring out like what I would consider the true meanings of life, I think that America has the meaning of life as a whole completely wrong. I think that America pursues the wrong things, even though our Declaration of Independence is about the pursuit of happiness, and we pursue the exact opposite of what brings happiness in that. And that's what we push on, that's the mentality, the culture that we live in is like, really, it doesn't, I could go like on, but it's mostly just recognizing that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other countries in the world.
Yeah.
And just because America is a great economic power doesn't mean that there aren't other great countries.
Yeah.
And there even could be greater countries in ways that you don't like perceive.
I was going to say it kind of goes back to the groupthink thing, because there are plenty of other countries that people were born in who live there and think it's the greatest country in the world.
Right.
Even if it's maybe small or whatever, they're like, yeah, this is the best place. Why wouldn't you want to live here? It's kind of the groupthink idea.
And also there's that, I get it, like there's that sense of like home, you have pride in like, where you're from and like all that type of stuff. But
I mean,
I have pride where I'm from. Like I
don't think I've ever really felt that. Like to say like, I get it, there's pride in where you're from. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. I feel like I don't feel like more pride because I'm from America or because I'm from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, if you saw something like in national news where Oklahoma won, or like, like if one of the Oklahoma state football teams like you won the national championship, you would like take pride in that. You'd be like, oh, yay, like Oklahoma won. Like that would
probably only because I know the name though, not because I'm like prideful of Oklahoma. I've never really felt that idea. Like that idea seems kind of foreign to me.
I mean, you don't have to feel it.
Well, I know. I'm just commenting that when people say that, I don't really understand what that is. But
I mean, I think to back what I was saying though, I get it. That it's having pride in where you came from and your like upbringing and the thing that you were from. Like, I totally get it, but it's just that entitlement.
Yeah, it crosses a line. I think you can be proud, but
anyways, I mean, I could just leave it at America's not the greatest country. Get over it. Which is funny with 24. Honesty may hurt in the short term, but is always best in the long term.
Totally. 100%. It's really uncomfortable to be honest, depending on in which way you're having to be honest, because I feel like I'm a pretty honest individual, but I avoid conflict like at all costs. So if I have to be honest to a person about, what they did or what I did to them, just kill me, please, But I do feel like if you can bridge that gap and be honest in a kind way, both of you like come from an understanding position, like the relationship is so much deeper after that.
And, thinking about it in terms of like a job or plans even, like this is a good one. We'll cancel plans, but we'll make an excuse. We'll lie about it. And, you'll say that, something came up or whatever, because you don't want to say,
I have nothing to do.
I decided I don't want to. Like,
I'm really bad at that.
And
I don't cancel plans often because I like to keep commitments. I'm like pretty whatever about that. But there have been some times where I like canceled plans mostly because of my introversion. I could not I just could not, you know? And so I canceled plans, but I said like, oh, I have a headache or whatever it was. And like, I'm trying really hard not to do that anymore because it isn't fair to the other person. Also, I'm trying really hard when I say no up front to not make excuses for it. I feel like that is something I'm not really good at. I'm like, oh, I have to work, or which is almost never true. Like nobody ever is like, oh, it's 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, I have to work. No, that's like hardly ever true, except for maybe in New York.
Yeah.
And also, like, I just feel like it's more of a, you don't owe anybody dishonesty. You know what I mean? Like, you don't owe them a valid excuse for not going to the party if it's just that you don't want to go.
Yeah.
You know? Or you don't, what I have a hard time with is like keeping alone time. And like, if somebody asks me to do something during my like scheduled alone time, I feel really guilty because it's like, well, technically I'm doing nothing, but I owe it to myself, you know, to keep that. And I don't have to make an excuse.
Right.
I feel like maybe I just said like 12 different things. I'm actually not sure. But I feel like that's all really important, to be honest, not only to them, but to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And like with a job too, it's like you call in sick and you like act like you're sick. And this is my life lesson and just in my experience. So, you know, you can take it as you will. But for me, I don't. Like, if that was in me, in my like, if I was in that situation, I may say I'm going to take a sick day because I have, you know, through my company benefits,
right,
I have a certain allotted amount of sick days. But I'm not going to act like I'm sick or say that I'm sick. I am taking a sick day, or I'm taking a personal day, or whatever it is. Or, you know, I have canceled on a couple gigs as we've been in New York, and I said specifically why, like, and I did not lie and say like, oh, you know, I'm sick or whatever. It's like, no, this is why, because I accidentally double booked myself, which, you know, obviously was the truth. Like, and the other one was more valuable to me. Like, I could have picked either one, but it's like, and I told it like, this is a better opportunity for me to take, so I'm taking that one. I'm sorry that I'm doing that, you know, and I will deal with, you know, I hate doing this, but I will deal with the consequences of doing that because this is the choice that I'm making. And in that, it's like, in the short term, it's like, it would have been easier for me because then to just lie and say like, oh, sorry, I'm coming down with sickness. Like, I don't think I'm going to be able to come in like whenever, you know, in a couple of days or whatever. And not doing that, it's funny because it's like I had a specific meeting with this one person about, and they were like, just on the fact of setting standards of what it means to, you know, cancel or not cancel, because I didn't lie. And it's like, I wouldn't have had to do that if I didn't lie, but ultimately it showed my character for, you know, and for me, and for, I guess, for me to fall asleep at night instead of thinking about it all the time. It's like, I just tell the truth, deal with the consequences. Like, and it's much better to tell the truth and deal with the consequences than deal with the future consequences of either my own mental health, just like going in a spiral of thinking about all the things, or the true consequences of lying, if found out later, are way worse than the true consequences of just telling the truth up front.
Yeah, it's true. It always feels really uncomfortable, but ultimately it is better.
Yeah, like, it's
also very character building.
And if I zone out in the middle of a conversation, I don't lie and just like act like
you are really good at that.
And just act like in whatever, like, you know,
you just don't go,
yeah, and just like play it off and like, oh wait, sorry, I zoned out for like 4 minutes. What did you just say? It's like, just be upfront and honest about it. I mean, I don't really but that's also kind of soapbox of mine. I just hate lying.
You really do. Also, what you define as lying is insane.
Well, if you are not speaking the truth, then you are lying.
No, it's not speaking the truth. It's just Ooh, I can't remember. We had this argument.
Yeah. Do you want to know what it is? It is about how you exaggerate.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. I tend to exaggerate sometimes, but I don't.
Even that is under exaggerating what you actually do.
No, it's not.
I tend to exaggerate sometimes.
I do. I've gotten a lot better at my exaggerations.
But that's the thing, is that when you speak about yourself, you're saying, I tend to exaggerate sometimes. But if you were talking about me, you would say, Cody always exaggerates.
Well, yeah. Duh. Anyways, the point is, I can exaggerate sometimes, as literally everybody does when they're telling a story. Thank you very much.
Figuratively, everybody does, because literally everybody doesn't.
No, literally everybody does. And anyways, you feel like that's lying, and I just think that's absurd. Also, the thing that bothers me the most about it is the way in which you approach it.
Which is apropos again for number 25 is honesty can be spoken in love.
Yeah. Yes, it can be. I feel like you've had to learn that.
That is one thing I've definitely had to learn.
And also, I feel like in that, well, like what we were just talking about when I said in the way in which you approach it or whatever, is also the scene in which you approach it. Because you used to have no problem calling people out in the middle of a whole group. And I feel like, well, first of all, that just, even the thought of it is like bringing back a lot of anxiety for me. Because I hate that so much. Like, I hate somebody being called out or whatever in a group. Like, it's just not fair to me. And you used to like you didn't even know that was a thing, but you would do that like in a group situation. You would say something and then like call me out in front of the whole group. And it was just awful. That is not in love.
No.
Yeah. But you can definitely speak honesty in love. Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you're doing it correctly, that's the only way it should. Well, first of all, that's the only way it should be done.
Right.
But if you're doing it correctly, they will recognize the benefit of it. Like, even if you're having to correct somebody and like give, what do you want to call it? Constructive criticism, you know? If you're doing it correctly, it just diffuses the entire situation, and there will be no like harm done.
You owe it to those that you love and to yourself and to those that you are, I guess, maybe literally or figuratively in charge of helping grow in whatever ways, that to be honest and to approach things and tell them honestly, the things that, whatever it is, that just you can speak honestly, but you can do that in love. You don't have to do that in harshness and whatever. And that is something that I very, 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 very much had to learn through my early 20s and into my mid 20s, because I was always spoke honestly, and I could not hide my feelings. I could not hide the way that I thought about things, but I have had a very hard time putting empathy and mercy and love in that language. And so I just came off as a jerk and as just way too harsh and just like I didn't like people, and like there were certain people that I very much liked, but I was in a position of leadership over them. And we were I would get into what Sarah and many others that knew me, they would say, Cody got it, he's just in work mode. And just because I would just be operating and I'm just being efficient and I'm getting things done and I'm being efficient with my language to you and what we need to do.
Right. It's like waste zero time.
Right. And
that means I'm not going to play around. This is what I'm saying. Do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so and the people on the receiving end, they were not in deep enough relationship with me to know that.
Right.
And nor was I presenting the information of which they needed to operate in a way that was received in like encouragement and love. It was just like, we are all here to do a job, and like
do your job.
I was, I was efficiently doing mine.
Right.
even in the language of which I spoke to those who were helping.
Yeah.
And then also in just other situations of having, needing to have hard conversations with people, and just that things that I felt by the way that they were, doing, acting, whatever it is, and choosing to sit down and have those hard conversations. Learning to have those hard conversations in honor, respect, and in love, even though I was speaking directly and I was speaking honestly and I was not sugarcoating any of the feelings, but there's still a difference. You can say the exact same words in the right tone, in the right environment, and in the right context to show that you care about them and that you love them enough to share this information, rather than the same words being shown in just blunt honesty that is received in embarrassment or received in
defensive,
dishonoring them in the moment.
Totally.
Yeah. So honesty can be spoken in love. Number 26, success is never a number. I think that this is one thing that is a soapbox that I have built for myself. And we've talked about it a lot. And just your success is never in a number, and your self-worth and the success that you are pursuing is never in a subscriber number, a follower count, or a dollar amount. I definitely, whenever I was like younger, I would think that, a certain dollar amount of money in the bank, or a certain dollar amount of, how much I am making is what success was going to be. Like I'm looking for this, like in this certain dollar amount. And if you are chasing numbers as success, those numbers will never come, because when you get there, the next number is the new success. You will constantly be chasing numbers. And for me, just learning that success is never a number. Success is something way more meaningful and way deeper than that. And finding success in contentment, and finding success in the actual joy of the job itself, or whatever it is.
I think I was watching a video interview of Maddie Healy, and he was talking, he never mentioned success, but he was saying there are all these things that we're taught are like growing up, that they are a destination. But pretty much like nothing in life is a destination. Like he was talking about, like, we are taught that happiness is a destination, or that, when this thing happens, then I will be an adult, or when this thing happens, then I will be successful. But like nothing is an actual destination. I feel like that's important, to a good perspective to have on those kinds of things, that you feel, if you ever find yourself saying like, okay, if I can just get this, then I'll feel happy, successful, whatever. Know that it's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much so. Number 27, the American church isn't the only or even best expression of Jesus.
Yeah. Well, we all know I have a whole thing about that. So yeah.
So that's one thing that I've learned, especially in my later 20s. So I grew up in the American church. I very much, and I worked in the American church, and all of those were great experiences. But as I have looked back at things that I was taught, and as I have explored the actual life of Jesus, and as I have also read, listened, and sought out differing perspectives and otherwise counsel other than my own circle of influence, I guess.
Right.
I have come to learn and realize that the American version of the religious entity of Christianity is not the only expression of Jesus, and I don't believe that it is the best expression of Jesus.
I think, obviously we're going to be like fair here and say there are beautiful things about the church, right? But it doesn't mean it kind of goes back to what we were talking about as like America is not the greatest country.
Mm-hmm.
It's like also saying like this isn't the only way to do church, or
Mm-hmm.
again, maybe this isn't even the best way to do church, or maybe it is, or who knows. It's also it's just that idea that like, I guess being open-minded and being understanding of the fact that like you don't have all the answers and you never will, you know, and like it's a little arrogant to think that like this is what church is, or,
right?
You know what I mean? That there can't be other expressions.
And I also had to, I guess, sub-lesson in this is I also had to learn even at one point that my white expression in church was not the only expression of Jesus, because I remember I would go to these like conferences or whatever, and there would be these different groups of people that would come in and, you know, basically they would like do the worship service, or, you know, whatever it was, like do productions, you know, just they would present their art of, you know, their expression, and I would be so annoyed because it wasn't to the level of excellence in which I think that things should operate.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn that my personal preference and expression of my white Christianity is not the only expression of God, and that their expression of worship and their expression of art through who they are is an equal value,
right,
and equal merit and of equal excellence. And of what I experience, it's just a different expression. And if I am to actually understand the full picture of God, then I need to actually look at all of the expressions of each individual, because ultimately I am only one tiny, I believe that I am made in the image of God, but I am made in one tiny specific image of God, and only one tiny expression. And, you know, my whiteness is an expression of God, and another person's blackness is an expression of who God is, and another person's, you know, like whatever it is, like it's that each individual person is another specific expression of who God is, in the same way that each body of or each group of believers like is another expression. And I had to learn that, and learn in all of those microcosms within the American church that maybe all of us have misinterpreted, or we have all looked to the wrong things, in that there is other, you know, expressions outside of America that are actually diving deeper into the true meanings of things, and not seeking a lot of the things that the American religious expression is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
Anyways, that's just a lesson. Like, I don't know if I articulated that in the way that I wanted to, because that's more of an internal lesson that I have learned. It's just really, it was like bitterness too. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think obviously we've both like gone through like well, I guess you would call it bitterness or whatever, just like a season of really disliking the church, generally speaking. And having to figure that out, and having to figure out like, okay, well, how do we remain a piece of this thing that, you know, is frustrating, and like, what does it look like to even follow Jesus, and what does it look like to be a church, and, you know, all of these questions. So I feel like asking those questions, like, okay, what is Jesus? And then asking like, okay, what do I believe is like my expression of church or whatever, you know, and then like applying that to the greater whole. Because I think I still have a lot of maybe frustrations with the church at large. But I understand the value in being faithful to it, I guess. Yeah. And like not leaving the church as a whole just because I don't think that it's necessarily correct.
There is beauty in the brokenness.
Yeah.
There are ultimately many, many, many broken things
Right.
But there are also ultimately many, many, many beautiful things. I ultimately find that there is more benefit to my life in being a part of than choosing to reject
Right. Or separate
everything
from.
because I find certain things like not necessarily even wrong. It's more so, and it's some things wrong, yes, but but not necessarily even everything wrong. It's more so skewed that it's caring way more about things that are secondary to what we should actually care about. You know, just different things like that. You know, I think just learning those lessons, figuring out things for myself, and again, like going back to last week when we talked about everything I taught was not true.
Right.
That
Exactly. Yeah.
So moving on to 28. Men and women can have complete opposite experiences at the exact same time.
I would say that happens 100% of the time. Yes.
And maybe this could even just be said that any two people can be having two completely different experiences at the exact same time. But the lesson that I learned, though, would be more so that in our gender dynamics, that the way that generally men would perceive one situation, women would perceive it in a completely different light. And if you fail to communicate about each other's experience of what just happened, or you know what did happen, whatever, that you go on living thinking that everybody had the same feelings about something and that everything's okay or everything's bad or like whatever. And you know, I learned this lesson specifically because I got married young, and I think just getting married in general, but I learned it through the lesson of the early years of our marriage, of just the things, the way I perceived certain situations, because there wasn't we hadn't learned how to openly, fully communicate with each other about our feelings in the way that certain things were happening. And so I went on living years of my life thinking that everything was amazing, and you went on living years of your life thinking that everything was awful. And whenever we finally figured out how to communicate through going to counseling, in those counseling sessions, it was like me dumbfounded. Like I was thinking we were going to counseling for one specific reason. Like we had this one thing. It was like, well, let's just go talk to a counselor about it. And then like we start talking, and then all of this stuff is happening, and it's like, wait, what? When? How? You did when? How? You felt really? Like it was like full, like I was just dumbfounded that you could have experienced all of these things,
right?
Literally the opposite of in which the way I experienced it,
right?
And so just the life lesson of that.
Yeah.
Two humans
yeah.
can experience something completely different. And if you don't have open communication, then you may go years of your life feeling in complete opposite ways.
Yeah. Open communication, but also again, self-awareness, but it's an open-mindedness to, and maybe empathy to even, I say this a lot, like we only have our own experience and we're only in our own head and like we can't know, but just the fact that like remembering that you only have your own experience, I feel like opens your mind up to understand that there are other experiences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think remembering that too, it just like helps you understand that, okay, maybe I should pay attention because somebody else, like they're not getting what I'm getting. Not that maybe it's obvious, again, like for you, it wasn't obvious that I was experiencing something else, but opening your mind to understand that that is even a potential is game changing.
Absolutely. And then on to 29 is I have to be in constant vigilance to not let screens control my life.
Yeah, I feel like that's every single person. We are not good at it. And
that is something that I would say that's in the more recent years of learning, in that it is so easy to let screens control me and not me control screens or me control what I'm spending my time on because of the addictive nature of social media, you know, movies,
even,
TV shows, like it being on the computer, like everything. Like thousands and thousands and thousands of years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of generations of people lived deep and meaningful lives without ever having a screen. And now we spend the majority of our life looking at screens.
And it happens so fast.
And I'm thankful for it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously
we are lucky to have been born in this generation where we get to experience the like huge like shift in knowledge and like connectedness and everything that technology and all these screens bring to our life. Like ultimately, I would never trade like not having screens.
There are a lot of positives.
Like it's way more positives like to having like all of the technology we have, but
you have to learn how to control it.
We have to learn. I've had to learn how to control it, and I've had to learn how to what is an appropriate amount of, you know, helpfulness that a screen can bring, or appropriate amount of entertainment I should allow a screen to bring me, instead of it being my life, that I live my life in a screen.
Which is really interesting because we're also the first people who are having to learn what is a healthy amount and how do you do that. There's like no history to go off of, you know. Like most things you can look back and like find it or whatever, but even the psychologists and the, you know, all the scientists, whatever, they're all like, well, this is our best guess.
Right.
You know, because there's no actual like proof. Like we are going to be the proof for future generations, which is kind of wild to think about, that like we don't get to look at like sage wisdom and advice from those who have gone before on like how to control screens.
Yeah.
Like it's all on us, which is kind of wild. It's a lot of trial and error. Totally.
And then very going out light, and that's not sarcastic. Number 30. Gear can become a mask to hide the insecurity of your creativity.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah.
So what that basically, there with everything, you can seek out gear and tools. The tools can become the thing instead of the creation becoming the thing. Right. And that ultimately you are seeking better and more and like constantly obsessing over what gear and what tools you should have for whatever hobby or whatever career or whatever it is. And that becomes the end in itself. And I think that the lesson is that it is easy to that to become a mask and to hide the insecurity of your creativity.
I was gonna say I think it goes back a little bit to what we were saying about how success is not a destination and is not like an end thing, and happiness isn't an end thing. It's just like that, like the stuff you have, the gear that you gear in whatever form, like not just obviously video or whatever,
video
but
gear,
like,
but then there's also hiking gear. There's cooking utensils. Like there's everything.
The stuff that you get in order to pursue this passion is not going to actually make you a good hiker,
right?
Or a good cook. Like it's just not. It's not true. It's not going to happen. So you should use what you have until your skill outgrows it.
Right.
That's whenever it's okay to, I feel like, purchase more. Or whatever, look for better gear. Because the risk, right, is that you get so excited and you go out and you buy all this new cooking utensils or whatever. You sort of satisfy something in your brain when you do that. You're like, yes, I've done it. And then you never cook anything.
Right.
Or you do cook stuff, but it's not to the level that you want it to be, so you quit. Because it wasn't a true passion. It was just a hobby. It was just something to get excited about.
Yeah. You buy the $1,000 guitar.
Right.
And whenever you sound like crap because you've never actually played guitar before, you give up instead of buying the $100 guitar.
And spending your money on lessons to become better.
Right. And learning and practicing and getting to the point where you could not sound any better on this $100 guitar, where now you should buy the $500, the $1,000, whatever it is, like guitar, because the gear now is holding you back, instead of you hiding behind the fact that you're not actually good enough. And none of us ever are good enough. None of us ever start out that way, but we obsess over gear. And I have that on the list because I've fallen into the trap. Like,
absolutely. It's fun too.
Yeah, gear is very fun. It's fun. But ultimately I have learned that for my medium, storytelling is king. And whether you tell that story using, if you're talking about video, like if you tell that story using a phone and you tell a great story, that is way more powerful of a piece of art than if you spent, $3,000 on the brand new 5D Mark, whatever, and you don't tell a good story. Nobody cares. And the art itself is amateur, because a great artist, somebody who has practiced their creativity, can use any tool to make it happen, because the tool is not the means to the end. It is like the creativity is like that. That's what it is. And then versus getting wrapped up in being a gearhead, but not actually ever creating anything meaningful.
Yeah. I think you can also, the example I thought of, like, for myself is I always do this when I decide I'm going to exercise. I get so excited about like getting in shape or whatever. And I feel like I need, the best sneakers and really nice Lululemon tights or whatever you call them.
Yeah.
What do you call them?
I don't know. Tights?
No. Leggings. And, whatever. And like, I feel this need to have like good shirts. And then I literally never go to the gym. You know what I mean? And it's like, the good shirt doesn't make you in shape. Like that is not a thing. So it would be better to spend that energy on the actual goal rather than finding the gear. You know what I mean? Like, because again, it satisfies something in your brain, I think, to be like, yes, I have the workout gear that I need. Then you're like, you feel like if you walk outside, you look like you work out, Yeah. But it's not true. You should just spend that energy on actually getting to the gym. Yeah. That's what I think.
One of my favorite things to go with the gear stuff and relating that to especially how people feel about in the more creative, like, or I guess not, that's not
photography,
the right
like cameras.
Yeah, just the photography, that type of realm of things. My favorite thing to say about that is if you go and have a great meal and at the end of the meal, you never compliment the cook or the chef on, oh, wow, you must have a really great oven. Those pans must be like high dollar because this is an amazing meal.
Yeah.
But we act that way whenever it comes to like photography, let's say, and like, oh, dang, that is an amazing picture. You must have an awesome camera. Yeah. And it's like,
or vice versa. We assume that they're a great photographer because they have a nice camera.
Right. And that, again, plays into the social value of things.
Yeah.
That, you want to be taken seriously as a photographer who, even though you literally just started, and so you buy the $3,000 camera so you can walk out and you can be taken seriously, but you can't actually create any art worth taking seriously.
Yeah, but mostly it's like we don't actually compliment the photographer on the photo that they made.
Right.
We compliment the camera.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not true because so much more than gear goes into making a photo. Yeah.
It's like, dang, it's a good photo. What lens did you use? What camera do you have?
Yeah. That's true.
All right, so that's the end. That was number 30. So those were the first 30 things that I thought of that I learned in this 30 years of existence upon the earth.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You did it.
I did it. I made it to the ripe old age of 30.
Remember when you were 18 and you really did think it was old?
I do. Yeah.
Man, I remember looking at 30-year-olds and being like, what?
Well, I remember whenever we moved to Tulsa and we were like 19, whatever, and the lead of the team was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought he was so much older than we are.
Yes.
We were. And I was like, wow. And then as we got older, I would, even whenever, before I turned 25, 23, 24, whatever, I would think back on like, you were 25 when we started this church.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I could not even fathom being in charge of people now.
Yeah.
And like, let alone at age 25 to be like, this is what we're doing, team. What? No, thank you. It's wild.
Yeah. So I have reached the age that there are maybe some of you listening to this who think that I am an old man.
Yeah.
And I get it. I've been there. But it's the cycle of growing, wisdom, learning, life. Whatever. But there it is. I hope you enjoyed my 30 lessons after 30 years in this 2-episode series.
Yep.
Thank you guys for listening, joining me on this journey. And if you want to help support us and help support this art, you can check out the Jensen AV Club. That would be greatly appreciated. And thank you to all of the members of the Jensen AV Club. If you forgot, the Jensen AV Club is our premium membership club that allows, gives you, I guess, like deeper access, exclusive content, and just provides different levels of tiers of support that you could, help us keep consumerism out of art and also just help us continue to create the art that we love creating. Without having to seek out ways to sell that to advertisers and other people and things like that. It's just plus a way for us to connect deeper with you guys.
Yep.
So again, thank you to the Jensen AV Club members. That is over at jensenav.club, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.